Hello, everybody! I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and welcome back to the Disney debate where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and myself decide to record things 3 or 4 different times because our recordings magically don't want to work because Discord hates us. Hello, everybody. I'm Zen, and technology hates me. I don't know what's going on. How's it going, Kat?
Technology sucks. Yeah, I'm as aggravated as you are. This is the second time we're recording Lobo because, again, technology hates us. Or it hates me because, again, my mic messed up just like it did with Almost Angels, which is why we're re-recording this. So apologies to all that out there if we sound a bit frustrated having to talk about this, because unlike Almost Angels, this film is not as much fun to talk about, as we will soon get into.
Yeah, this is not a fun film, and there's a lot of subjects in this that we're not happy to talk about. We will give a trigger warning in a bit, but there's some stuff and some things, and when we were trying to test this for the 3rd time, my technology messed up, and it high-pitched up Kat's voice, so she sounded like a chipmunk. It's been a day.
Christmas time is here.
In any case, how's it going, Doug?
Lobo. We're talking about Lobo. I'll be doing better once we're done.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I had planned to rewatch The Legend of Lobo for this, but it's been a weekend, and then I thought to myself, I know all the talking points that I want to. I've seen this film enough. There's not enough in this film to talk about on its own. We're gonna have some other things to discuss, but dear God, Lobo has its own thing. Before we begin, though, I do want to give a major trigger warning because there are some dodgy things that we're going to be talking about today. So the subject of animal abuse, animal endangerment, death of animals, and stuff like that would affect you negatively. Please, you don't have to listen to this episode. We understand. We just want to know that, we had to sit through this twice. So we're putting our anger into this because we don't like what's going on in this. There's a lot of history going on. So you don't have to listen to this. You could watch the Almost Angels or the Tower of Terror. Those are fun. So with that being said, you have been warned. In any case, today we're talking about the 1962 Disney film, The Legend of Lobo. And it falls in a pattern of films that we've been talking about for a very long time on the Disney debate, because Disney really liked animals. And, in real life, Disney was a fan of animals. He loved dogs. Not a big fan of cats, but he did put cats in Pinocchio. So he did like animals. However, the growing trend throughout a lot of his career was Boy and His Dog Story, nature documentary, or some mixing of the two. And throughout the history of the Disney debate, we've covered so many films that have a different take on this formula. And some of you, if you've been watching from the very beginning, might remember that we covered several of the nature documentaries. We talked about Beaver Valley, we talked about The Vanishing Prairie, and The Living Desert.
Scorpion
and those
Hoedown!
were interesting. Yeah, Scorpion Hoedown for the win! Those were interesting to me because I hadn't seen a lot of nature documentaries, but I had seen a lot of, the IMAX, nature type things, and I really liked a lot of the History Channel or Discovery Channel animal stories because I don't know a lot about animals, and I want to see more about it. And so The Living Desert and The Vanishing Prairie were actually really fun for me, just to go through. And I thought Beaver Valley was okay, although the reason we stopped doing those is because they were really hard to find. Doug actually, in the early days of the Disney debate, drove all the way up to where I was living at the time with a copy of, I think, The Vanishing Prairie, and we watched it together. That's how hard it was to find because there was no Disney Plus, there was none of this stuff. Like, maybe I could have found it at my local library, but you have to understand, like, the first 50 episodes of the Disney debate or so, that was us going blind. We didn't have a lot of the resources that we had today, and we were trying to do our best with what we have. Now we have a lot more resources, but Doug after that was just like, let's put a stop to the documentaries because there's a lot of them.
Not to mention, I think that one...
Doug, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, not to mention with, I think with the Vanishing Prairie one, I was lucky to find it at one of my library systems on VHS, but I don't think you had a cassette player, and I think I wound up like having to get multiple systems involved for you to even view it. So, yeah. It was a whole thing.
It was crazy. It was crazy because, again, this was way back in 2010 when we started the Disney debate. We have been doing this for 15 years now. And back then, we just had to use what we had. We had to try to find the DVD. Sometimes we had to use less than legal means. And that's why sometimes, like, the dub seemed a little bit weird. I think The Littlest Outlaw was one of the biggest examples where I got a comment saying the version that you saw was probably like the Spanish dub, and it might have been, it just, we couldn't find any other copy. And so we only were working with what we have. And you have to understand, for like the first 50 episodes of the Disney debate, we tried to do one every single week. And that was taxing. That's why we kind of started spreading it out. And from episode 50 to, I think we're on episode like 108 now, we've been trying to slow it down so that we have quality over quantity, and that we're actually taking time to research the films and not just surface level it. So that's my 2 cents. What are your thoughts on that, Kat?
No, I agree. Those early days were definitely rough on us. It's like, yes, you get the more popular movies, which are super easy to find, Snow White, Dumbo, Fantasia, and so on, but trying to find those more obscure films, the ones that even Disney themselves won't really acknowledge, that was, like, an almost impossible task. Like, I got lucky at times, because, at the time my uncle was alive, and he was really big into, like, bootleg stuff. He saved, like, everything, so he always, like, managed to find some of this obscure stuff. But even back then, there were some things even he couldn't find that, again, attributes to why some of these are, like, so unknown in the Disney fandom. But, yeah, the documentaries were the worst, because, like, again, they were really rough. Like, they waffled between being boring or being, like, cobbled together stock footage with funny narration over it. And granted, some of the scenes were funny. Again, who can top Scorpion Hoedown? But even then, like, I knew we were never going to get that type of, like, fun with the other documentaries, which were trying to be more legitimate and educational. So, yeah, I'm honestly glad that we stopped those, especially since, from what we're going to get into later, these documentaries got, like, kind of worse as time went on, especially since in order to have, like, an actual narrative, they had to get the animals to do some rather unwise things, some rather uncomfortable situations that they got pushed into. So, yeah, unfortunately, Lobo is kind of one of these films, hence why our very big reluctance to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't even know if these things are available on Disney Plus now. A lot of the harder to find films we've actually went to, like, is it Amazon that we keep going to? Because, like,
it's like Amazon,
I
or what was Vudu, now Fandango at Home.
Yeah, we watch a lot of them. They're uploaded on YouTube. In fact, some of them, like, the TV movies have been uploaded on YouTube by some people. But, like, it's weird because 10 years ago, a lot of these films we had a lot of trouble finding, and now they're on these streaming services, which is really cool, but some of them aren't streaming anywhere, like Tower of Terror. And when it comes to the nature documentaries, I don't know if they're forgotten or not, but there might be a reason for it. Now, I like the boy and his dog narrative stories that, started with Old Yeller. Those, I think, are really good. But one thing you'll notice in a lot of them is they put the animals in dangerous situations, such as, stuff with Nikki, with the dog and the bear, and it's only getting worse because this was before they had protections for animals. And many of you who have watched Milo and Otis are probably familiar with a lot of the problems that they had, endangering animals in these films. It gets worse with the Disney nature documentaries, and unfortunately, Disney didn't really know about it as far as I know. So, we have to talk about a figure who was prominent throughout the entirety of the Disney debate that we haven't talked about yet. Because we really didn't want to delve into this darkness, let's talk about James Algar. You see, James Algar was a legend. He got his start animating on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then he directed Fantasia, Bambi, Victory Through Air Power, because we always have to use airplanes.
Shut up.
But then, he kind of switched over, because around that time was the war era, and they started moving things more towards a live-action direction. So, while he did direct the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, from around the 1940s in the late era, he started directing all of the Disney nature documentaries, including Seal Island, Beaver Valley, some what we haven't covered, like the Olympic Elk, Bear Country, there's bears out there. He directed a lot of these, like the African Lion. But then something came to light about him, and it all started with White Wilderness. Many of you may have heard about the myth of lemmings, how they all jump off a cliff, implying mass unaliving. And I don't like using that word, but I mean, he's trying to make it seem like lemmings do that. However, it later came to life that the lemmings were transported to the location, jostled on turntables, and repeatedly shoved off a cliff in order to get these shots. Meaning, he made up and killed all those lemmings. Like, the myth of the lemming is his fault. And this only came to light in 1982 on the CBC television news magazine program, The Fifth Estate. It was exposing animal cruelty in Hollywood, and this was the biggest thing. Now, this was well past Disney's time, and he was kind of quietly fired after this point. But then he came back for Fantasia 2000, and I don't know how he got that back. I get that he was the director for the original Fantasia, but this guy, every single one of his animal documentaries could have included this level of cruelty. And Disney, as far as I know, did not know about this. Kat, do you want to weigh in on this?
I mean, at least in the Fantasia movie, he couldn't hurt any actual animals. Just saying. But yeah, we like Zen said, we hesitated to talk about this guy, but now it's come to a point where we kind of have to, because this keeps popping up in a lot of his works. Honestly, we should have talked about this back in Nikki the Wild Dog, but yeah, it it just becomes more and more prominent as we go on with these, and it's become both an annoyance and an aggravation, because we don't like watching movies where animals, are implied to have been hurt, because these types of movies are not just documentaries. They're structured real life fantasies. It's like, oh, we want to show this happy fantasy adventure with these animals, but obviously we can't get these wild animals to do what we say, so we're gonna have to provoke them and put them in certain situations they normally wouldn't be in, just to get the reaction that we want, and then we're gonna have to do it over and over and over again for different ways in order to get enough stock footage that we can make a story out of it. And that's not right. It is absolutely not right. And the fact that the Disney company did so many of these is just disheartening. I get that, they say that Walt had no idea this was going on, but given how often we've seen this so far in some of these movies, I find it a little hard to believe he didn't have, a little hint as to what was going on in the backgrounds, because you would think at some point watching these, he'd be like, huh, how did you get the reaction out of that wolf? Why does that one creature look realistically dead? It should have raised some questions. And yeah, just to hear the whole thing with the lemming, I'm glad we never watched or reviewed White Wilderness, and we never will, because I don't think I could stand to watch that scene now, knowing that those lemmings actually, unalive, not willingly unalive themselves, but were still unalived regardless. Because, oh god. Again, I look forward to when we get out of this era and we don't have to deal with these types of movies anymore, especially because this just begs the question, if you have such a hard time making animals do what you want, why not just animate them? You are an animation company. Just animate the animals doing what you want. James Algar, you've done this before. It blows my mind, just the lengths they gone to just to get, a bare minimum story out of these poor animals.
Yeah, and there's it leaves a very bad taste in the mouth. And not only that, this is a guy who, again, animated Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, directed Fantasia and Bambi, did the Wind in the Willows segment of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, but then, a couple decades later, he's the one responsible for producing 10 Who Dared.
I mean,
he's responsible for the snake guy.
At least the only animal that potentially got hurt in the movie was a snake, but I think the guy got hurt more than the snake. But yeah, even then, again, there's a pattern in all of his movies, and it's very disturbing.
And he also wrote The Incredible Journey, which many of you may know as Homeward Bound. And we're going to have to talk about that in the future, because I love Homeward Bound. It's just, I really hope animal protections were better by then. Doug.
Yeah, what you call it? I remember watching, some people reacting to an old Robot Chicken sketch where it's kind of play on nature documentaries. And they did one in particular with, the lemming, nature's word we don't use anymore, yeah. And I remember, now hearing, all about James Algar certainly hit different and made it a little more uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah. It's something that, it came to light in the 80s, and that's probably why it was hard to find a lot of these nature documentaries, and why they steered away from some of these. But growing up, I knew none of this, and I watched a lot of these documentaries because I like to see nature and observe it. And the better nature documentaries don't make the animals fight each other. And we've seen movies recently, not just Nikki, where they had the dog and the bear tied together, but there was also the cougar and the puppies in the same shot. In what was it called?
Big Red?
What?
Is it Big Red you're talking about?
In Big Red, yeah, in Big Red, they endangered Big Red with a cougar and his puppies. They have all these things that are just uncomfortable to watch, And it just keeps building because that's what we have to talk about with The Legend of Lobo. And there's so many problems with it, but also he directed, produced, and wrote The Legend of Lobo. He wanted this out, and I'm just like, there's so many points in this film where the dog and wolves are endangered. It gets uncomfortable to me, and if this was his magnum opus, I'm sorry, but he did not deserve to do Fantasia 2000. I liked that movie, but he did not deserve to direct that.
Again, at least we can take comfort in the fact that he didn't hurt any actual movies, and he didn't hurt any actual animals in those movies. So
now, to be fair, The Legend of Lobo is the last time that he was director of a live-action production. So maybe they internally found out, and they were just like, we're gonna put you to the side, maybe? But it's so weird how, if they knew, they would let him keep working with them, but if they didn't know, then they would still let him direct Fantasia 2000. This boggles my mind. Alright. Doug, do you have anything to add about James Algar before I move it back to Lobo?
Yeah, I mean, as bad as Algar is, it's the blame doesn't entirely, lie with him. You can also blame Ernest Thompson Seton, the author of Wild Animals I Have Known, the basis for, Lobo. And probably, it also, from what I've heard, Algar kind of, made it happier than how the author made it go down. I think, originally, Lobo dies in just a horrific, tragic, just uncomfortable way. So at least, we're spared that in the movie.
Yeah, we'll get to the ending in a bit. Like, the behind the scenes of this is just horrifying. Alright, let's talk a little bit about The Legend of Lobo itself. For those who do not know, The Legend of Lobo is a 1962 animal adventure film, part documentary, part boy and his dog, even though the humans are very much not there. It follows the life and adventures of Lobo, a wolf born and raised in southwestern North America. It is based upon Lobo, the King of Currumpaw by Ernest Thompson Seton, and it's from his book, The Wild Animals I Have Known. It's kind of a series of short stories. Now, neither the time period nor the precise location are specified in the film, mostly because it's told from the wolf's point of view, and there is no dialogue in the film aside from one of the best parts where there is a song by the Sherman Brothers, which is basically the Ballad of Lobo. And there's some narration by Rex Allen, but it's one of these weird things where I liked Nikki because it told a story and it actually gave us a narrative to follow. It gave us, highs and lows. It wasn't realistic, but it gave us stuff to follow. This does not. And the ballad comes in and out throughout. We're supposed to really grow to like this wolf Lobo. He's supposed to be the most fearsome wolf of all time, but we spend so much time with him as a puppy. And when the ballad comes back, it's kind of jarring because it's in the middle and it's like, oh, time's passing, let's have this ballad, and it's like it can't pick a lane on how it wants to present itself. It feels initially like a nature documentary with narration, but then it's a ballad and then it's a story, and then it keeps changing what it wants to be, because from what I understand, this was a non-fiction account. The book was based on the non-fiction account by Seton of his real encounter with the wolf Lobo. And Seton was a naturalist and a bounty hunter in real life. So, before we get into, like, the realism of it, like, this is supposed to be based on a true story, but it's been kind of tweaked in places, but it doesn't seem tweaked in the right places. Kat?
Yeah, I've read over the synopsis of the original story of Lobo, and there are parts that I'm glad that they cut, and other parts that I kind of wish that they showed. Because Ernest Seton, believe it or not, he was actually one of the original founders of the Boy Scouts, and he was a big naturalist. You know, he even like started like a group like honoring Native American traditions, but you know, for white people, and it was thankfully later renamed. But he picked up a lot in his travels, and of course, you know, he liked to hunt because he hadn't yet realized that, you know, hunting the animals you love is a bad thing. But in particular, he was trying to hunt after this particular wolf called Lobo, who not only was feared because he was always going after ranchers' cattle, but he was smart enough to be able to avoid humans, because he apparently could always pick up on their scent, could always smell like their gunfire. He associated the cows and the horses with humans and knew to avoid them. He was a very smart, like, in fact, he was so smart, he actually was able to smell the poison they would put in bait to trap him, and would actually, like, bite through the non-poison bits to eat, and then leave the poison bits behind. Like, that is insanely smart. And in fact, when Seton himself tried to use like better bait, like really like deeply hidden poison, not only did Lobo like separate the poisonous meat from the regular, he actually shat on it in defiance. You know, as a big F you, as a big FU, like, you can't fool me.
For me to poop on.
Exactly. So, like I said, stuff like that I thought was pretty cool. I'm like, wow, this wolf's a freaking genius and stuff. But as we mentioned, you know, it becomes gritty real fast because despite Ernest's best attempts, he just can't capture Lobo. Like, what should have taken a few weeks to capture this one wolf turned into months. And eventually, the only way he was able to get a hold of him was by trapping his mate and killing her. And he basically used the body to lure Lobo out. And Lobo, you know, being all, like, mournful of his dead mate, he went in all guns blazing and unfortunately met his end. And in the most gruesome way, I should mention, to be like, all four of his legs just got caught in traps. But of course, it took this much for Seton to realize, this is too cruel even for me. I shouldn't kill this animal. I should just let him, you know, die in peace. And then, you know, Lobo dies, and then the guy mounts Lobo's pelt in his museum, which it's still up there to this day. So yeah, this book is like both badass, but also incredibly messed up.
Like, there's a lot of things about it that's messed up. Him being a naturalist, but, like, trying to hunt these animals. The way in which Lobo died because he refused to fight back because his mate was dead, and he saw the dead mate, and he just died there. So we spent, like, a day with Lobo actually dying in real life. And there's a lot of stuff there, but also there's another controversy. Several years after its publication, Seton and his works came under fire during the Nature Fakers controversy, which began in 1903 when naturalist John Burroughs published an essay called Real and Sham Natural History, and he blamed Seton's collection of stories for founding the sentimental animal story genre, which he felt fabricated events and wild animal behaviors. He even amended the title of the collection to Wild Animals I Alone Have Known. So, there's a lot to unpack here.
So the fake news conspiracy.
Like, I wasn't around in 1903. I don't know if he made up this stuff. But there's, you know, this could be made up. But why would you make up something that messed up? You know? God, Doug, what do you have to say about all that?
I pass.
I will say this. Like, I understand the conspiracy about people faking stories about animals, because some of that stuff can be harmful, as we just mentioned about James Algar, spreading the belief that lemmings unalive themselves. So that can definitely be harmful. There's even other, like, not as harmful information out there, but it's still inaccurate. Like, for instance, that mother otters will hold up their baby otters to predators in order to gain sympathy and run away. Yeah, that is obviously fake. It's an unfortunate thing humans like to do, where they attribute human traits to animals in order to relate to them more and make them more sympathetic. I mean, on the one hand, like I said, it's harmful because it gives people a false perception of how these animals actually operate. On the other hand, it does make them more appealing to people, so they won't be hunted to extinction like a lot of them were. Especially in this case, the wolf. The wolf was thought to be a demonic creature for so long, it was almost hunted to extinction. Until we realized, we need wolves. They are a vital part of the ecosystem, and now we work like hell to preserve them and get their numbers back up. So it's like a double-edged sword, a catch-22 in both sense. Like, I get, people want the truth. They want people to know how animals actually operate. And trust me, some animals operate in a really messed up way that is very uncomfortable to talk about. But at the same time, at least these stories, like, bring these animals to light in a way we would never see them otherwise.
On that note, and speaking of wolves, one myth that has withstood the test of time, in which I wish would die, is the alpha and the omega theory. Because the person who proposed the alpha wolf theory retracted it, because he realized that it was only wolves in captivity, and alphas aren't a real thing. So all you people spouting the alpha male nonsense, that isn't a real thing. I'm just saying.
No, that is true. Like, it's like the prison mentality. It's like, you have the big burly inmates, and then you have those that are their bitches. So, you have that hierarchy while you're in prison, but once you're outside of it, anything goes. So it's the same thing with animals in captivity. Like, they all gain a mentality. They all want to, like, make sure they get the most food, the most attention, and so on and so forth. So they have to act out a lot more. So I can understand how that mentality came to light. But yeah, the fact that so many people use that as, like, a personality trait, it is laughably ridiculous.
Yeah, man, like, totally the alpha male, like, I'm pumping some iron, man. I'm so oily and slick. Like, no.
The rest of you are just sigmas.
Like, if you say that unironically, I'm sorry, but you're pathetic. Okay, so we've talked about the backstory. We've talked about the actual book. We've talked about the real life stuff and the controversy. Let's talk a little bit about the film. Doug, what do you think about the film?
This film was just like, I've seen it before. It's cute in some instances, but others it's like, why are we pairing some of these animals together? Especially ones that, should not be anywhere near each other. Obviously, there's the risk to the animals' lives, even without, them being paired with other animals, such as, like, with the baby raccoons being sent down the river. That made me uncomfortable there. Other times, there's just a whole lot of nothing, and I got so bored at times that I zoned out and went on my phone. So, yeah, I don't really feel much for this movie.
The problem that I have with this film, aside from the rampant animal abuse, and this is not a case of me saying I'm excusing animal abuse, because, like, I'm not. I am not excusing animal abuse. It's like, well, I can excuse animal abuse, but I don't condone the boring parts. No, I'm not excusing animal abuse, but the structure of the film isn't enjoyable. Like, on its own, it tries to be a coming-of-age story about the wolf. His father, El Feroz, is teaching him how to hunt and all this other stuff. But then we see all this stuff that makes me uncomfortable. They put 6-week-old wolf pups on cliffs, and they're falling down cliffs. And it's just like, I don't want to watch it after that. And there's a lot of times where, like, okay, his father fights with a honey badger over the possession of a den, and the badger wins, so that was, like, completely unnecessary. And Lobo gets lost, and he chews on an armadillo's ear, and is cornered by a rattlesnake, but his parents come and save him. And the biggest problem with this structure of film is it's one of those where instead of it's an and then film. And then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Instead of because this happened, the consequences are this happened. It's not a narrative so much as a bunch of stuff that happens, as The Simpsons would say. Would you agree with that, Kat?
Yeah, totally agreed. Again, this was like this was basically the creators just going, well, what happened if we stick this animal next to a wolf? What happens if we stick this animal next to a wolf? What happens if we do this, this, and that? Again, it's that uncomfortable aspect where it's like, we need to get material for a story, so let's put two animals together that would normally never have anything to do with each other and see what happens. And let's film it. So that's basically what happens. Is like I said, a lot of those moments, the puppy's falling down the cliffs, and the wolf puppy biting the armadillo's ear, like that just made me cringe because I'm like, this should not be happening. This would never be happening, and I blame the director and everyone else involved in this for making it happen. Although I will say there were two cute moments that I did like, where thankfully nothing harmful, I hope, happened. One was that the little puppy actually rode atop of a tortoise. That was actually adorable.
Okay, that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, that was a cute little moment, because again, they weren't hurting each other, and the turtle was just strolling along, the little puppy was getting a free ride, so it was all good. The other was, while Lobo was lost, he meets up with an antelope. A little baby antelope, and they actually have fun together. They go swimming in the river, and they play around a family of raccoons. And granted, I got a little bit nervous with the raccoons, but still, the two of them playing together, because, they're too young to realize that they're supposed to be enemies. I thought that was cute. It was harmless, and it was cute. And granted, it had nothing to do with the story whatsoever. It's not like the antelope ever comes back ever again, but it was still fun. But again, it adds to the whole thing of, why is this in the movie? This doesn't serve the narrative. What does this have to do with the Legend of Lobo? Does he acquire turtle riding powers? Does he suddenly make friends with all the antelope in the prairie? Why is this here? How does this serve the narrative?
No, you don't understand. That turtle was Gamera, and Gamera is friend to all children, but when he grows up, he's not a child anymore. I solved it.
So wait, did Lobo give his legend powers to Gamera, or did Gamera give his powers to Lobo? How did this work out here?
Lobo, when he died, gave Gamera the power.
Okay. He said, "Avenge me!" And so he took out his vengeance on all of Japan.
Gamera! No. We have to make these things up, because otherwise, what point does this serve in the film? Because the antelope doesn't come back. And this is a third of the film where they're doing a whole bunch of stuff with the puppy, and it doesn't come back. And I keep asking to myself, why am I not just watching Bambi? Because that had a story. And people say, oh, Bambi's boring. I dare you to watch this.
I'm like, this is, supposed to be the Legend of Lobo. I think it's like, we open with, this is the scourge of the prairie, whatever. They put a bounty on him. And it's like, okay, I'm interested in this. Why is he, so feared? So, why do they put such a bounty on him? It's like, we take forever to get to that point. And then it's like, even then, it's barely about Lobo.
Yeah, his dad gets more focused than Lobo does. Like, they keep building up how El Ferros was even more feared than Lobo. And they show him going on like a solo hunting trip and everything, taking down a whole antelope by himself. And it's like, okay, well, we're actually seeing why El Ferros is badass. So why isn't this movie about him? Like, we're taking forever to get to Lobo. When is Lobo actually going to live up to the Legend of Lobo? It takes up like a good like chunk, like more than 50% of the film till we get like to that point. Like, it just makes you wonder. It's like, did they, change? Did they give us the wrong title by accident, or did El Ferro's like, the dog prematurely bite it, and so they had no choice but to switch to Lobo? Is that what actually happened?
I'm still surprised that this isn't about the DC Lobo, which would actually be interesting. The main man. If any main man Lobo, if anything happened to him, his blood makes another Lobo. Like, much more interesting film.
Give it time. But yeah, like again, like you said, the biggest problem with this is the pacing, the focus, and the narrative. Because again, they're not really telling us why this is such an epic legend. It's just a bunch of stock animal footage. And yeah, it's cute to see the puppy. It's cute to see his adventures and everything. But he doesn't actually like take a turn toward his legendary status until we introduce some tragedy into the mix. And of course, that's when we have to introduce man. And I just say man because none of these human characters are ever named. None of them have a personality or even dialogue for that matter. But they single-handedly like destroy Lobo's family and pretty much put him into the status he is known as, with the legend, and that they make him hate humans so much that he learns how to bypass them by, picking up their scent and knowing where they travel and so on and so forth. It's like, cool, there are other animals that can do that too, What makes Lobo so special?
Yeah, it's kind of a shame. I had to go to the Wikipedia to learn their names. We have, and who's like acting them. Now, Emile Genest from Big Red is Joe Colon, who is credited as Cattleman 1, and Walter Pigeon from Almost Angels as Lelouch, Cattleman 2. So we don't have characters in this film. They're not named, so we don't have any idea. They're just the threat of man. But unlike Bambi, where the threat of man was actually like shown in every single thing that happened, the fire, the majestic deer strolling afterwards, the changing of the seasons, Bambi's mom dying, that was the threat of man. You didn't see man. It's just wasted here.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand why they didn't go in a more stylistic way with the humans. They could have done the same thing with Bambi, where you only saw man as like a shadow or something, or a silhouette, or they could go like Lady and the Tramp method, where they could only show them from like the waist down, like you only see their feet, you only see their hands or something. Man is this unknown but horrifying entity that just is barely off screen, but his presence is known, because Lobo suffers a lot. We watch as his poor mother gets shot and she's trying to like run away injured, and they just go and like finish her off in a horrible manner. Like, you even see her body afterwards, and I hope to God that was like a taxidermy like body or something, because like, dear God, if they actually offed a wolf just for that scene, I would be super pissed. And then on top of that, with his father, again, the great feared El Ferros, he gets baited into this other trap, which snares around his leg, and we just watch as he's just struggling in agony, and his poor son's trying to comfort him and has no choice but to abandon him by the time the hunters show up and off him. It's like so awful. And then these humans show up, and again, they say nothing, and they just are there. It's like they're still there, and of course and then we have the bounty hunter later. This dude doesn't even have a name. This dude doesn't even have a credit. Like, I can't find
Yeah.
anything on this guy. I even look on the IMDb page. It does not list any of the actors in this movie. The only ones it lists is Rex Allen as the narrator, and then 2 other guys who are like the French and Danish narrators for this. Like, that is how inconsequential these human characters are, and yet they cause all this strife. It just, God.
It's a shame because I could see how this could be done well. The looming threat of man, a wild animal, if we had seen or heard, like, the thoughts from the wolves' perspectives. Maybe, but we get a narrator, and even then, it would be better in a book format. Kind of, like a coming-of-age story about, an animal trying to protect its family, realizing the dangers of the world. Don't give voices or faces to the humans. Don't do that. You got to give this looming presence and have the internal dilemma. But we get nothing from Lobo. It's just, oh yeah, Lobo had to deal with this by the narrator. It's too... Would schmaltzy be the right word? Like, it doesn't fit.
I just don't like how we have both the narrator saying what's going on and then the song saying what's going on around the same time. It's like, why are we repeating this? Like, this is supposed to be a visual medium. We should be able to see what's happening and deduce it for ourselves. Like, if you're not going to make these characters talk, why are you making the off-screen presences talk even more? It just,
Yeah. Doug, you want to weigh in on this?
Do I have to?
You don't have to. I don't want you to not be able to speak. So
I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It's just, yeah, it's kind of like what Kat was saying. It's like there, and what you were saying. There's like this whole, either it's really schmaltzy or just it's nothing. It's the range of just blah.
yeah. So we have the first third, which is the puppy. The second third, which is Lobo growing up and getting a mate and losing his parents, taking forever. And there's a large portion where they have to, take down Buffalo, but they're unsuccessful. And it's just like a lot of these pointless things don't seem to come back except for his mate. Then we get to the actual hunter who comes in from Texas, and he brings all the dogs. Just all the dogs. And I'm just like, why do you need all these dogs? Including one that he keeps in a muzzle. And I'm just like, he lets him out of the muzzle to track down Lobo, and I'm like, the dog's gonna attack you, buddy. Like, why would you need a muzzle that big?
I mean, to be fair, wolfhounds are pretty big dogs, and they can be vicious if not trained properly. So, given that how he's trained these to hunt down wolves, I can see why he needs a lot and why he needs one that is probably more vicious than usual. But yeah, I looked at that muzzle, I'm like, who authorized that? Like, who allowed that? That looks like the most bulky, painful thing you could think of to strap onto a dog's head. Like, you really didn't have a leather muzzle? Like, anything that was a little less? Like, no, you had to build this dog up to look really scary, so let's make the muzzle look as scary as possible, like it's an Iron Maiden or something. Like, dear God. It's like, come on, you didn't do that with the other dogs. Like, why do you have to do it with the poor wolfhound? Like, I feel so bad for that dog.
I really hope they didn't hurt the dogs, but given the track record of this film, I'm not going to say much because there's a lot going to happen here. Now, the film does some good things in showcasing the cunning of Lobo at this point. Shows that, he eats around the poison. He doesn't eat the poison meat. He's smart to not see the traps. They actually show that. And one of the cool things is that they show that he's a clever wolf. He finds kind of like a shelter that he crosses this very narrow wooden tree that's fallen down across a huge ravine and then keeps going back and forth. That way that predators can't get to him. Clever. The movie shows this multiple times, though, endangering the wolf. And that's the biggest problem to me, because I know they forced him to go back and forth across this narrow thing on a ravine several times. And I kept saying to myself, I wish I was back to the point where I knew that no one got harmed, but they did.
Yeah, I wonder how many wolves went over the edge, like, trying to get that shot. Because wolves aren't cats. They don't have, like, a natural balance, nor can they land on their feet. Like, I know some wolves could be more graceful than your average dog, but even then, that was a very narrow bridge. And I'm certain at times, like, they must have stumbled trying to get different angles for that shot. So, yeah, those poor wolves.
Like, it hurts, because everything that I could praise about this film, about, oh, that shows some good things about the wolf, or it shows some good things about nature, it's immediately preceded by, and then they got endangered. These animals were hurt. And it really, like, I have 3 cats. I love cats. I love animals. I used to be afraid of dogs. I've kind of gotten over that. Dogs are good. Puppers are good. Cats are good. Animals are good. And when I see something like this where they're endangered in a film, it's really hard. It's hard to watch Milo and Otis knowing what happened. Shots like these make me not want to see this film again. It's why I didn't rewatch it, because I knew I would have to sit through that again. And I'm not paying $3 to watch this on Amazon just to watch a wolf being forced across a log, Doug.
Yeah, I agree. There's like animals that certainly scare me. Certainly, I don't want to be near these animals. I know they're like killers and stuff, but that said, if they are put into situations that they should not be and potentially hurt or killed, I am not okay with that. I don't want harm to come to them outside of, anything that, they would be in a normal day-to-day, experiencing. I mean, and even then, I don't want animals to hurt or get, suffer for anything. So, yeah, no, that to know what happens with this, to, think about those potentials going on in that movie, it's not something I want to think about.
Yeah. Kat, do you have anything to add to that?
I just had one thought. Like, I understand the rationale of, the bridge, because this way they're not being hunted by predators, and Lobo doesn't have to deal with a cougar trying to eat him and his family like they do at the beginning. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, when the puppies get older, how are you supposed to get them across that bridge? Because I don't think you're going to be able to carry them across as easily, and if you try to get them to do it themselves, they're definitely going to go plummeting. So I think that aspect just kind of made me more uneasy than the dogs going across back and forth.
Oh god, I didn't even think about that. I mean, we already saw the pups tumbling down a cliff, but
Yeah.
I know I'm a bit heated in this episode, and I'm trying to remain as calm as I can, but when animals get hurt, I get angry. And this is just like every single turn. Let's talk about the ending, and how they changed it. So, again, as we said, in the book, we're not for sure if this was real life, but in the book, they lured Lobo's mate, killed her, and Lobo found his mate dead, refused to fight back, died of blood loss. It's a tragic ending, but according to the book, it really happened. Here we get the Disney treatment. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second, but he sets a trap for Lobo and snares Lobo's mate, uses her as a lure, but instead, Lobo leads his pack, all the pack that he's gathered, finally living up to his legend, to create a cattle stampede that enables him to liberate his mate and strike out for unsettled territory, ending the film. Now, I get the Disney ending stigma. Disney endings often change historical events to make them tamer, to make them more palatable for audiences, and a lot of people don't like that. You know, I love Hercules, but in the real mythology, Zeus was awful. And they changed it.
And then
But
along came
in a
Zeus.
lot of the... And then along came Zeus, and he messed up everything. The difference with Hercules and a lot of the other Disney films that really work for me is that they understand that there's a struggle that has to happen. There is a change in the reality, but it's in order to tell a message that they want to teach kids or to teach people or to give a good narrative. You know, I can go the distance. It's not the size of, you know, the strength of the hero, it's the size of their heart, which is very opposite if you actually know the real myth of Hercules or Heracles. But it works for an audience because it gives us something to strive for. It does not work in this case, where real life accounts are tragic and they just covered it up. It's why a lot of people don't like Pearl Harbor, the movie, because they changed real events, and not in a way to make a, you know, a statement on things, but a grr rah America message. Here, Lobo gets away, but there's no message. There's no point. It feels disrespectful to the memory of this wolf to say that, oh, he got away because he was just that clever, when what happened in real life is tragic, but you should have shown it. Kat, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, because again, like we mentioned, Lobo did die horrifically, and after losing his mate, that was like easily like the worst thing to happen to him. And granted, it took that much for Ernest Seton to change his mind and be like, you know what, I should stop killing wolves and try to save them instead. So at least you could argue that some good came out of it, because ultimately he used his influence and money and power to go toward conservation. So at least you could say that. It's like, yes, it's a downer ending to have them kill off the wolf, but at least you could do like a post-credit thing by saying that like it went to this conservation act, it helps save and rehabilitate these many wolves and stuff. So at least you could take something out of all of the suffering. And I do believe Lobo was a real wolf that he killed, because apparently Lobo's pelt is kept at the Ernest Seton Memorial Library in Cimarron, New Mexico. And I believe it's still there. So again, there's proof that this wolf existed. As to, you know, his legend and all the stuff that he did, that is debatable, but he must have done some of it to make this much of an impression on Ernest Seton for him to write this story. Like, again, I know a lot of hunters and stuff like to do, like, big, you know, tall tales, like, do the, you know, the usual fish tails and everything. Like, I caught this creature this big, and it took me 3 hours to reel him in. And I'm sure there's something to this dog, because animals are clever. I mean, look at the story about the emus versus Australia to see how clever some animals can be when it comes to taking on man when they attempt to destroy them. Like, animals are resourceful. So I do believe there is merit in telling stories like this to show that, no, animals are not just dumb, wild beasts that is there for us to, you know, either enjoy as pets or to hunt as game or whatever. They are their own beings. They have different personalities. They have capabilities. But I still feel like at the same time, you know, if you're going to tell the story, tell it right and give it meaning. Don't make us feel by the end like, well, we just sat through a whole bunch of nothing. Because honestly, that's how I felt after this was over. Because I'm like, okay, the legend was we watched a wolf outsmart some cattlemen and run off into the sunset. Cool. Sounds like every other story.
This could have been an email. I'm just saying. Like,
Exactly.
This could have been an emu.
Doug, what are your thoughts on the ending?
Yeah. To go along with what you guys said, I'd say there's certainly a hypocrisy to it, to, you know, having the Disney ending of it, and, you know, like, he's the story is from, you know, this guy who was a bounty hunter, and, you know, the whole story got him to sort of change his ways and become, you know, conservationalist and everything. And then this, you know, just kind of messes with the whole idea of it by, you know, probably how many animals were killed in the service of making this film, but in the end, you know, Lobo gets to live a happy ending and all that. It's like, yeah, so that completely missed the point.
That satisfied the kitties for 90 minutes.
Well, that was a load of nothing. Like, there's not really much more I can say about this film. We've already we recorded it once. Unfortunately, that recording, well, portions of it does survive. I have the backups. Some of it was corrupted, so we're not going to be using it. But you know, 2 hours is way too much to be talking about this film. Like, my final thoughts. This is one of the worst Disney films. I don't think it's worse than Bon Voyage, but it's a different level of bad because it really harms animals, and it harms the idea of conservation, and it harms the idea of why these nature documentaries should exist. They should be there to make you want to save these animals. And it just, instead, we get all this tragedy, and we had to talk for most of this runtime about these people who abused animals to make a film about saving animals. It does not make sense.
The height of irony.
This is just... it's the height of irony. And it's like, I want to believe that Walt Disney did not know what was going on. Again, his health was starting to fail at this point. He was preoccupied with Disneyland. Maybe he didn't know. He could have known. I want to believe he didn't. But no one is above making mistakes. And if Disney claimed to love animals, I hope he did not know, because this is one of the biggest stains on his career with these nature documentaries. And part of why we just stopped talking about them. I don't think we're going to talk about any more of these documentaries. We obviously have more of these wilderness type stories, but we're getting to the end of that part of the 60s, thank God. Kat, final thoughts.
Yeah, we're done with the animal cruelty. Let's get to the wacky drugged out movies instead. But yeah, I totally agree. This is definitely one of the worser movies. Again, just because of the context alone of it, because of what was done in order to get this footage. And even as a story itself, it just is so lacking. It's like, and that's what happens when you're using, you know, creatures that can't be directed. You have to make up stuff. You have to force things to happen. And you got to compensate by, like, showing cute stuff just so the audience doesn't get bored. But, dear God, did I get bored during this. Like Doug said, I was checking my phone, too. It's, like, just taking forever. And there's just a bunch of, like, you know, a bunch of nothing a lot of the time. And the legend doesn't even make sense. Like, it's not a legend. It's just a dog hunting cattle. Like, there's just a wolf, you know, who happens to be smarter than your average wolf. There's nothing special about Lobo in this context. Like, I was more intrigued reading the book than I was watching this movie. So, yeah, I am so glad that we didn't have to rewatch this. Like, I thought I had to, but honestly, as soon as I watched clips on YouTube, I'm like, oh yeah, it's all coming back. Okay. So, yeah, I do not recommend watching this, especially if you're an animal lover, because it is just cringe to watch at times. Like, if you want to see the cute stuff, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. And then, like I said, the song's catchy as hell. Like, I'm still humming the Lobo song.
Lobo.
It's like, thank you, Sherman Brothers, for once again making another catchy earworm. But again, those little bright points aside, it's not a good movie. This style of narration, of storytelling, needs to end, like, now. I know it already ended 10 decades ago, but it still needs to end, like, in the time frame that we're reviewing these movies. So yeah, avoid if you can, if at all costs. Like, I don't think you're gonna come across this accidentally, but yeah, just don't watch it.
It's definitely in the bottom of what we watched. Again, I think Bon Voyage was the worst, but that actually, like, caused a panic attack. So, like, that's saying something. Doug, final thoughts.
Yeah, like you said, this one's a skip. There are so many adjectives, disappointing, wasted potential, uncomfortable, anticlimactic, it's lost for a reason. I know, obviously, you can find it on Amazon, but it's not worth looking for. It's definitely one of those where I'm fine with it just being gone.
And with that, we have recorded all 3 of the episodes that were lost to time, so we're back to where we're supposed to be, and we don't have to think about Lobo ever again. I hope not. Next time, stay tuned for our Christmas episode of the Disney Debate as Phil joins us to watch the Santa Claus 3, because, Phil really wanted to be in for that. He was just like, oh my god, that's one of my favorite movies. It is so bad it's good. We took a little bit of time deciding this one until I started threatening, like, okay, Doug, I need you to decide, or I'm gonna make us watch the Star Wars Holiday.
No!
No!
So you see the options that we had.
Well, I will say
God.
right now, I will say right now, I'm sure Phil and I are going to butt heads over this movie, but I look forward to it, because at least talking about that one will be more fun than talking about this movie. So.
You mean we're going to have an actual Disney debate?
Yuck, 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 yuck.
Also, I wanna give a shout out to my phone, because my phone autocorrected Santa Claus 3 to Saint Clair 3, so that's what we're talking about.
Join us for St. Clair 3 on the Disney Debate.
The Escape
Goldberg! But next time will at least be a little bit more fun, enjoyable. I'm not a huge fan of Martin Short. I did, however, see him in Inner Space, and he was actually really good in that. But with that being said, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Doug Macberrie.
And we will see you next time for St. Clair 3. And just remember, treat your animals right.